Welcome everyone to our first episode of the Hall of Sports Pod. And with me today to preview the opening of the NFL season is we have Jeff Reinebold. Now, you may have seen him from SkySports. He's anybody that watches NFL over in the UK or where I'm from in Ireland is probably very used to his face and a lot of his analysis. Welcome to the podcast today, Jeff.
That's really a pleasure to be here, man. It's always good to talk to Ireland. I love the Emerald Isle. Every time I've been there, it's been really a blast.
Yeah, you have to come over soon whenever this COVID deal is all done.
I'm with you. I need some Guinness in my life.
Oh, I know. So do we. Like our pubs over here aren't open until the 21st of September, so we're nearly there.
I would think that's got to be next to St. Patrick's Day. That's going to have to be like the biggest celebration in Irish history, isn't it? Getting the pubs open again.
Oh, I know. Like we didn't have a St. Patrick's Day this year because it hit. All of our stuff went on lockdown just maybe a couple of days before it hit Paddy's Day. So, like for me and for a lot of my friends, we've been kind of stuck at home, working at home for the last while. It's probably been the same for you guys over there.
Yeah, and the thing that people don't understand in North America, because culturally it's different, obviously, but the pub is more than a place to go just drink beer. It's really the social gathering place of the neighborhood. And, and I think that is such a cool deal. Like when you walk in and everybody knows one another, and it's not about just going there to get drunk. It's going there to talk and, whether it's politics or sport or families or whatever it is, and generational, it's really a cool deal. And I really kind of wish we had that kind of thing on this side of the Atlantic.
Yeah, it's something that brings, I think, communities together. It's where everybody, people just from where they are in the pub. Yeah. I think the only time I've had that in America is I have a few friends that are from Pittsburgh, and they all go to the same kind of local place every single weekend. So where everybody sits. So it's that's probably the closest I got. Like anytime I go back to Chicago, it's more of go to one pub, then go to another, and it's more about the drinks rather than the actual people in the conversation.
Hey man, when I was coaching in NFL Europe, we're playing at White Hart Lane, where Tottenham used to play. They give you 2 tickets to the game. I didn't know anybody in London at the time, so I didn't want the tickets to go to waste. So, I got dressed in my coaching clothes and got ready to get out. And you got 3 hours before the game, so I went across the street. There was a little pub on the corner, and I took my 2 tickets in. And it was so fun. Because I walked in and I felt like I was in, and I got all this coaching gear on, right? Yeah. And I walk in and all of a sudden every head in the bar turns and looks at me. And I felt like I was like that guy in the Old West movies, it's just about ready to get thrown out of the bar. And I went to the bartender and I handed him the tickets and I said, hey man, just give these away and I hope somebody, gets an opportunity to watch a professional football game. Yeah. And he said, football. And I said, yeah. And he said, what, or do you coach? I said, yeah. And he said, what team? I said, the Rhine Fire. And he looked at me and he went, what league is that? And I said, hey, just take the tickets, man. I'm out of here. It was, and now it's changed. It's changed so much. Yeah. Now. BBC just jumped on Monday night. And, we got, Channel 5 jumped on Monday night. BBC has OC and Jay Bell and Chappie, and then we have a 24/7 channel, and you guys are doing podcasts. I mean, it's such a cool thing.
Oh no, it's great. I was at 2 of the games in London this past year. I was in obviously the Bears game and Raiders, which not great day for me, but overall it was the atmosphere there was great because I think it was one of the first games at the new Tottenham Stadium. And then we went to the Rams and Bengals game as well, which was, again, I think it was the last one that was in Wembley before it all kind of closed down. And we don't know what's going on because they all got cancelled this year. So hopefully we'll have all of them coming back again.
I'm with you. I hope we get all 4 of them back. And let me say this, because I've been to, I don't know how many, probably 12 or 16 Super Bowls. And next to the Super Bowl, those international games in London are the best fan experience that I've ever been around.
Yeah.
All the NFL games I've been in, coached in, been around professional football for 30 years now. It's just incredible. I remember when we went, the first one I went to, and we're driving up to Wembley, and you see the tailgating and the massive people, and every jersey in the National Football League is represented. I saw jerseys from the old days in NFL Europe: Amsterdam Admirals, Scottish Claymores, London Monarchs, Barcelona Dragons. I mean, it's an awesome football environment.
Yeah, it's crazy. I even remember because we got a couple of the college games in Dublin. So we got one a couple of years ago. I think it was UCF and Penn State. So we had Blake Bortles against Christian Hackenberg. So I think that was just the year before Hackenberg came out into the draft. So it was kind of that highly rated player coming through. And to see then, I think it was that same year that Bortles came out. I think it was the first time people in Dublin got to kind of witness it, because it was always that kind of crowd that would go over to London and kind of go over together and kind of hang out in the same bars over there. But it was good to get that back here. And I think it was supposed to come back again, because we've had a couple of those Army against Navy games that have come here. And I think that was supposed to happen again this year, but obviously got cancelled for COVID. So hopefully, because it's gotten a lot of popular over here, because a lot of the colleges and stuff here have teams. So it's one of those that you're not weird when you're wearing an NFL jersey. You see it all the time. Like the amount of times you see a Brady jersey, and you'll still see Manning all the time. It might be a little bit weird now seeing Brady now that he's with the Bucs, but we'll definitely go through that.
Hey, bro, I know exactly what you're saying about the passion of the Irish fans, because I came to a friend of mine was the head coach at Trinity University.
Yeah.
And he said, Jeff, would you come over and do a clinic and then, have a practice with the players? And I thought he meant his Trinity University players.
Yeah.
And we go out to a field, and all of a sudden I walk out on the field, and there are 50 kids in 30 different jerseys. Yeah. And I turned around, I said, Darren, what's going on here? And he goes, Coach, they've come from everywhere. We had kids from Northern Ireland drove, I don't know how long that is.
Yeah,
down.
It's probably about 3 hours.
They drove 3 hours to go through an hour and 15-minute practice.
Yeah.
And I was like, these kids love football. And I really think, and this may be a project for you and me to take on, is we need to bring a CFL game to Croke Park. I think that would be awesome.
That would be unbelievable, because I just remember that anytime when I go to the States in the summer, and sometimes you still see kind of towards the end of the CFL, and it's mayhem when you look at the difference. But it's one of those that I think people would really get into. I've always said it to my friends over here. It's one of the sport that you really want to go and see live. Not only NFL, but you have CFL and hockey, because they're just 100 miles an hour. And it's one of those that it's very interesting. It'd be good to get them over here. Again, it's just to kind of expand the brand of football that is just past soccer that we're used to over here. I think right now is the perfect time to kind of want to push that, because I think everybody's just hungry for sports, because after so long without having nothing, to have something to look forward to would be great.
We should get on that, because I really believe this, that our game is for a European fan who's used to seeing the ball go back and forth, and I remember when we first came to Europe in 1995 to restart NFL Europe, one of the complaints that we got from fans all the time was the game was too slow. You'd go in the huddle and you'd stand in the huddle for a minute, and then you 40 seconds. So our game is much more back and forth. And people ask me about Canadian football, and I say, well, it's kind of a cross between rugby, Australian rules football, and hurling. I mean, that's about as
I know
it's about
it's
as good
crazy.
as I can give you. It is a wild game, and I'm sure that the Irish fans would love it.
Yeah, it's anytime I go over to America and someone's asked me to explain hurling to them, I always it's a mixture of CFL and hockey.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's always an interesting one. But yeah, I think it would be a great one to have over here because I think people will get behind it and they'd enjoy it. Like even if just to get a couple of the games on TV over here would be a good start because like with all this we're noticing here, there's so many more new kind of sports channels kind of coming up. It'd be great for them to kind of show one or two of them because I know recently they started to show. I think it was on BT Sport. They've started to show like baseball. They've started to show hockey. And Sky Sports. There's the NBA that they show now. So it would be good to be able to broaden that up because you even see it. There's a lot of Irish people in Canada.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that football's football, and whether you play with a ball with stripes on it like we do or a ball with no stripes like the NFL does, and the rule changes are really minimal, but it's the greatest game. I truly believe it's the greatest game, and that's why it's so much fun to do what we do, to have a chance to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's really an enjoyable thing.
I think that's why you saw a little bit of success of when the XFL started back, where people were, I think it was at the stage where people were just wanting sports and they wanted football. And even though it was a lot of the players that were kind of would have been end of roster players on kind of the NFL side of things or guys that might have made the practice squad, the fact that they were all competing and you saw the different rules that were a little bit different in the NFL, which some people have kind of complained about with some of the rules that they still can. For years they couldn't decide what a catch was. Yeah, but I think having that kind of difference, or even like the in-game interviews that were going on, it's something that was new, it was fresh, and people wanted to hear about it. And again, it's always good when you can have more football, and even when, like you said, with the CFL, you start to see, especially now because the season got cancelled, so there's been a lot of players kind of coming out and being like, give me my chance. So it'd be interesting to see as players go down, especially with everything with COVID, because we don't know what's going to happen, that teams are going to need to be able to bring in more players because, again, nobody knows how long this is going to last for. Kind of talking about that, how do you think the NFL has done in relation to COVID, especially with training camps going on?
Well, I think that, the testing is really the bottom line. And when you look at the testing results that we just got this week, that there was only one positive test throughout the National Football League. And when you talk about testing, I think it's important that people understand that they're not just testing the players. They're testing the coaches, the managers, the equipment men, everybody that has anything to do with the program is tested on an almost daily basis. And I think the NFL has done a great job of trying to mitigate as much exposure as they possibly can. As a matter of fact, I heard one doctor say that he felt like your chances of getting COVID-19 were much greater outside of the bubble environment of training camp than they were inside the environment of training camp. And I think that now we move into a second stage of, preventive medicine, because now the players are going to start to have more free time. They're going to start to travel. There's more ways for them to get exposed. So I think we've learned from baseball that you really have to be judicious with how you let players travel. Now, I say that, and then I also qualify it with the way a baseball team travels and the way an NFL football team travels are completely different. Typically in the NFL, and this is maybe the viewers or listeners aren't aware of this, they will work out Saturday morning at their own complex. Let's say the Falcons, who are going to play the Seahawks. Saturday morning, they'll work out in their complex. They'll get on a charter airplane where they don't go through the terminal. They go right on the bus takes you right to the airplane. You get on the airplane, you charter directly to Seattle. The bus picks you up on the tarmac. You don't even go into the airport. You get a police escort back to your hotel. And then in the past, the players were free that evening to go out and have dinner, but they had to be back for evening meetings. I think what's going to happen now is teams aren't going to give them that freedom in the evening. They're going to keep them in the hotel, feed them in the hotel, have your evening meetings, have your snack before you go to bed. And then the next morning, and there are security guys on every floor of the hotel. So there isn't like people can wander in there and come knock on your door. And then the next morning you get up, you have your meetings, have your pregame meal, get on the bus, go to the stadium, play the game, and go right to the airport after the game. So the travel is really not the problem that it is in professional baseball.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that they probably have as an advantage is they've seen what the NBA have done. They've seen baseball, they've seen hockey. They could even take kind of European soccer as an example, because I think it was they started back in maybe April or May and finished up in July. And you didn't see many cases kind of shoot up between the different teams. But then in recent weeks, there's been international football where they've played the different countries. So I think there's been a lot of cases that have come through the French national team. So as these players are now traveling together, going to different countries, you're starting to see it kind of creep up a little bit. So it might be something that the NFL have to take into consideration, especially, like you said, the amount of people that travel with any one team. You just have to look at the sideline and you see the amount of people that are involved. Like, it's not just, I think what people forget is it's not like other sports where it's just your head coach, your offensive coordinator, your defensive coordinator. You have all the kind of quality control coaches and that play into it as well. So it can be a little bit difficult to kind of see how it'll get on. Hopefully it can be contained, like you're saying, that the kind of safest place seemed to be within their bubble. And it's been good that we've had training camp over the past couple of weeks, and we haven't had that. Like you mentioned, there was only one person that's really come out that's had COVID. The one thing that it kind of brings me to talk about is because the training camp was a little bit changed, where there's no preseason games. Often we see at the start of the season, there's 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 games that they say that players are starting to adjust to the season. And you start to see it's kind of sloppy at the beginning of the first few games. And then suddenly you start to see the teams take shape, and you start to see really after those kind of first 3 or 4 games who the strong teams are. Do you think that this might take a little bit longer this year? Because with COVID going on, they've only had, 4 or 5 weeks of training camp now. Like, I think from what I was reading, for a couple of teams, they've really only had a couple live practices. So how do you think that's going to affect some of the players going into kind of this weekend?
I don't think there's any question it's going to affect it in a big way. And I think first area where you look at is tackling. And I don't know if you caught the other night a college game, BYU against Navy, and Navy had made the choice during training camp to not tackle, to not do any face-to-face work together. It was basically all on bags. They got beat 55-0. And so I think that, when you look at this, the teams that were able to mimic the speed of the game as well as best as possible will have a huge edge. I think teams that have veteran players have a huge edge. But still, we're going to see some things in the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season you're going to look at and you're going to go, wow, is that the NFL? But, it's the same. The thing about it, and this is what the NFL really prides itself on, it's a very level playing surface. There's not an advantage for any other team, for one team over another. And I think that's the way they want it to be. They want everybody to have competitive balance. There'll be a worst to first team. There is one every year. Who it's going to be, we can talk about. But I really, truly believe that the NFL has done it right. And I think they've been proactive. I think they've been extremely ahead of the curve. And now I just am hopeful that the players will. And when you look at the stats, and look at the testing, I think the players have really taken it to heart. Now, will they be able to take it to heart through the season when the distractions come, when they have more free time, when all of those things come? We'll see.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the issue, because for the first few weeks, you'll probably see players be full into the game. And then as the season gets along, like even if it takes some of the teams that don't get off to that good start and players start to kind of see the end of the season, that's when they might kind of not be as tight within their bubble. And that's where we might see a problem, because at the end of the day, I think every fan just wants get the 16 games done, get into the playoffs. So then at least we can have as normal as a season as we can, because I think especially over in the States, like it's been great that the likes of the NBA has been going on. It's been on pretty much every single night. You had the NHL going on, and even with baseball, the months previous to that, it was where there was no live sports. It was terrible. I would be listening to podcasts or radio shows, and it's what to talk about. It's all about like what's going to happen. So at least we have sports now to talk about, which is kind of a good thing. So it was kind of a weird off season where not only did we have COVID, but we saw a lot of changes happen. For anyone who hasn't kind of been paying attention, I think everybody now probably knows the big story where Brady ended up going to Tampa Bay. But there was a lot of change around quarterbacks this year, and it's not something you regularly see. You might see one or two maybe change in the odd year, and you see a couple of rookies coming in. Who do you think out of the different quarterbacks that have moved teams has the best chance to succeed this season?
Well, if you just look at it on paper, I think certainly Brady has a tremendous opportunity in Tampa Bay because, he's got, Goodwin and, they are so blessed at the skill positions. I mean, they can roll out four tight ends against you that are all really good players. They go out and get Fournette, who is going to really help that throwing game because he is such a dominant inside runner that it forces people to drop a safety into the box. And now, you're talking about guys, legitimate big time receivers outside are going to be in one-on-one coverage. And, Cameron Brate, who I think is a really good tight end. I mean, really good tight end.
Yeah, I was hoping he would get traded to the Bears this year.
He's number 3 on the depth chart. I mean, when in the world would a tight end like Cameron Brate be number 3 on the depth chart? They go out and they draft Tristan Wirfs to help with that offensive line. They're a young, improving back end on defense. They've got Ndamukong Suh. They've got pass rushers on both edges. They have and a great coach in Bruce Arians. So I think that the table is really set for Brady. And then, you look around the league, and people ask me about Phillip Rivers, and I've been a Phillip Rivers fan for a long time. I just really am concerned about what I saw out of Phillip Rivers last year. He's always been a guy that believed in his arm and would, try and put the ball in a small window. Last year, those balls started to get picked, and he has very difficult time now getting away from the rush. His immobility affects even the running game, where he can't take the ball to the perimeter on the stretch play anymore. He has to toss it out there. So I think, although I love Phillip Rivers, I'm really concerned about what he's going to be able to do to that Indianapolis team, because Indianapolis they're in the Super Bowl window now, and I think he'll be over Jacoby Brissett, yes, but is he a good enough quarterback at this stage of his career to get to the Super Bowl? I'd like to say so, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I think the other one that kind of stands out just because of kind of recent reports is Cam Newton going to New England, because we didn't see much of him because of his injuries, and kind of the last impression that fans had was when he'd be running that he would be getting hit, and he didn't have that kind of zip getting back up again and kind of going back at it, and he kind of went out of favor in Carolina for a little bit. And even the fact that the one thing I always thought was when you had Ron Rivera going to Washington and he didn't bring Cam in, and he's still waiting out there and ends up at New England, which probably worked out best for Cam, especially for this season. How do you think he's going to get on in New England? Do you think he suits the style that Bill Belichick wants to play there? It's always hard to have to replace Brady.
Well, I think one of the things people have to realize is that the Patriots are committed to one thing more than anything, and that's winning. Yeah. And so they will play the style of football that gives them the best chance to win football games. You look at their defense over the years, and they've been a 3-4 team, they've been a 4-3 team, they've been a blitz team, they've been a zone cover team. They're whatever their personnel tells them they have to do to get the best chance to win. Now, with Cam, I'm really excited to see how much of the old Cam Newton is left. If that old Cam Newton that we saw at Carolina when they were, in the Super Bowl and all of that, I really think that it's going to be a great match. He's a great deep ball thrower. The other day I looked at some tape of him throwing in training camp, and I'm a little concerned because his arm actions, the ball's coming out of his arm really low now. And I think that's probably because of his shoulder injury. Yeah. But know this, Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick and every coach in that building is going to do whatever they need to do to give the New England Patriots the best chance to succeed. I think it's a breath of fresh air for both guys. For Belichick, it's a chance for him to show that it was not Tom Brady all those years. It was really about the Patriot way, and I think that's important to him. And on the other hand, for Cam Newton, I think it's an opportunity for him to go to an organization that will genuinely use his skills. Because I thought, even when they were good in Carolina, I really was concerned about the fact he got hit way too much. Yeah. He had to carry too much of a load. There was not enough support cast around him. When you think about it, Greg Olson's been the real good receiver that he's had. He's had, they drafted Benjamin. He didn't get it done. They traded away Steve Smith, and it's just been tough on him. He's had to do way too much. Now he's in an organization where I think he just needs to do what they ask him to do.
Yeah, it's a good point there about where he was constantly having to run and he's getting hit a lot. He was probably the most hit quarterback in the NFL for a couple of seasons. And it's the one thing that you always say is even if he's able to run in 6, 7, 8, 9 touchdowns, that's great. But it only takes one hit and he's done. It's the one thing that you saw with the season when Philly won, that Carson Wentz was on an MVP season and it's one hit and tears his ACL, and then the story of Nick Foles begins. But I guess sticking on the quarterback topic, it kind of goes into the game tonight with the two big new contracts with Pat Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. Unfortunately for a Bears fan, this is a hard game for me to watch. But again, obviously we've seen the greatness that Mahomes has had the last 2 seasons. It's kind of unheralded as a rookie coming in. Well, not really a rookie. He's in his second season and coming in and being as dominant as he was, and then being able to continue that as well and bring his team to the Super Bowl last season against a very good 49ers team. How do you think the seasons will compare between Watson and Mahomes now that they've both got their money? Do you think that's going to affect either team going forward? Because again, we see that when big deals are given out to quarterbacks, that sometimes it can affect the overall team because of kind of cap situations and things like that.
Well, I think both of the contracts are obviously deserved. Think about this, man. Think about this one. There will be on that field tonight, and I'm talking about in guaranteed money, right? $250 million between those two quarterbacks. $250 million US between those two quarterbacks. So obviously those are huge contracts, but I think those guys deserve every penny of it, because you look at what the spin-off benefits are, the merchandising benefits, the profile benefit, the stability, all those things. Both are dynamic players. Both are great people. I think if you talk to guys who know Deshaun and know Patrick, they all say the same things about both of them. Great character guys, good people, the kind of guys you want to build a franchise around. They say you don't build a house on, in the sand. You build it on the rock. Well, those guys are the rock of those franchises, and they'll be for the next 10 years. And that, to me, is well spent money. It's when you look at what's going on in Dallas right now with, Dak, and, there is a greater chance of a blow up, if you will, in that situation than I think there is in Kansas City or the Texans, because those guys are so well felt in their locker room. They're both leaders in that locker room.
Yeah. It's the one thing that always stuck out at me about, because that draft when it was Mahomes, Watson, Trubisky that came out was, I think there was an interview that was done with Dabo Sweeney where he was asked, I think it was it might have been in relation to the Bears, that if the Bears had the chance to take him at 3, what should they do? And Dabo Sweeney says he's the Michael Jordan of the NFL. You should trade up to 1. And it's the one thing that always kind of stuck out to me is when someone has that confidence in someone, it shows that they can lead a team. And he was right. We've seen Watson this season, even in the past seasons, that he's kind of grown into that role of being kind of the lead guy. And he's probably going to have to do that again with the kind of transition that the Texans are going to have to go through this year without Hopkins, which was a big deal in the off season. How do you think that their offense is going to deal with that?
That's really, really, really an interesting point because they you look at it and you go, man, that's a bad trade. I mean, David Johnson, who averaged 3.6 or 7 yards a carry last year for one of the best receivers in football. Sometimes there's a thing called addition by subtraction, and I'm not saying anything derogatory towards Hopkins because I love Hopkins, but there comes a time in a player's career sometimes, and I think Stephon Diggs is another case in point, where a guy it's time for him to go. He's done what he can do in that franchise. What I like about what they've done, and I think this will be borne out over time, if you look at their receiving core, and obviously Brandon Cooks has got some injury things, Fuller's got some injury things, but when those guys are healthy, those are big time receivers. And the offensive line that Deshaun Watson played behind the first 2 years was almost criminal that you put him back there because he was getting hit all the time. Now you get Laramie Tunsil from Miami. You go out and draft your other tackle in the first round. You got Martin at center. You got really good players in the offensive line. So I think the biggest key to me now is how they distribute the ball, how Deshaun makes up for the one big-time player by spreading the ball around. They'll become a much harder team to defend when they've got more diversity in their offense. And I think that's going to be interesting for me to see. Here's the other thing, too. Tonight, when we watch, fans need to understand that the guy calling plays for the Texans tonight, Kelly, the offensive coordinator, he's never called plays in a game. And I'm going to tell you something. That's a tough environment to get into if you've never called plays.
Especially when you're up against Andy Reid.
Yeah, that's true. And Steve Spagnuolo and Honey Badger and all those other guys they got out there.
I guess the one interesting thing that I took from it was what they kind of did without having Hopkins is that they kind of put up based on their speed now. So you look at some of the receivers that they have in Fuller, for example. I think they got in Randall Cobb this year as well. They really want to kind of not so much the exact same as the way the Chiefs play, but you see that kind of speed element to help out their quarterback as well. Because how many times do you see Tyreek Hill get the ball and it might be a 5-yard slant pass and then he's gone for a touchdown. So having that speed element might help. And if they can kind of have balance in the run game and the pass game, it might work out for Watson, like you're saying, being able to kind of diversify and not just be focused in on DeAndre Hopkins.
Well, it's interesting. Football, if you study football, and I consider myself a little bit of a football historian, maybe that's when you get old, you're older, it's a nice way to say you're an old dude. But what you see in football is that it's a copycat league, right?
Yeah.
If something's successful, everybody's going to go to it. So, for example, if you look at historically, when June Jones and Mouse Davis came to the NFL and they went to Houston with Warren Moon, and all of a sudden you got this black quarterback operating out of a shotgun, and there's 4 wide receivers in the game and no tight end. And, I remember the traditionalists were saying that'll never work in the National Football League. Then all of a sudden they're ripping people with it. And the next thing you see, the fun bunch over with the Washington Redskins, all those little midget receivers that they had. And then it started to change because people said, okay, you can't play with the big, slow corners anymore. You got to find your little guys. and then they go to nickel defense and all the things you need to do to take that away. And so all of a sudden we evolve again. And then, it's going on right now. I'm telling you, the Ravens are revolutionizing offensive football. People are going to say, okay, you can take a guy and like Jackson, and you can take him and you can say, maybe he doesn't really throw well from the pocket. Maybe he can't make full field reads. Maybe he can't, all that stuff. But he's such a dynamic presence as an athlete. We'll build the offense around him and feature the running game. And all of a sudden now, all these teams that are used to playing nickel and dime 3 out of the 4 snaps are having to play against 3 tight ends and, the zone read and the pulling guards, all the stuff that it's hard to practice.
Yeah.
So I think the game will go that way, and then it'll go back that way again. Because especially offensive coaches, they're all copycat guys. They think they invented football, but they all really just watch one another.
Yeah. Do you think that style of, like you said with the Ravens, works when it comes to kind of playoff football? Because we've seen Jackson, who had the MVP type season last season, and then it gets deep into the playoffs, and he doesn't look the same as he did during the regular season. You saw it similarly enough to the year before when he came in. He had that bit of success, and then I think it was the Chargers game in the playoffs, and he looked like he couldn't complete a pass for 2 quarters. Do you think that style of football, like you're saying with new offenses, works when you get deep into the playoffs, or do you think it's just mainly a regular season type phenomenon?
Well, football's football. Now, obviously, the game does change a little bit when you get to the playoffs. It's tougher to score. People tend to play more conservatively.
Yeah.
I think until he wins a Super Bowl, then I think the jury will always, there'll always be the traditionalists out there that say you can't win with that kind of passing game, that kind of quarterback. Now, the reality of it is, with the exception of Russell Wilson, there really hasn't been a quarterback like that. And let me just say this, Russell Wilson is much better from the pocket than Jackson is right now.
Yeah.
If Jackson will continue to grow, and he showed great growth last year, but if he'll continue to grow in his ability to throw from the pocket, here's where he gets into problems, as I see it. When it's 2nd and 5 and 2nd and 3, he can throw because the defenses are all stacked on the line of scrimmage. They're expecting to run. He gets play action. That's all good. When it's 3rd and 10, not so good because now the defenses change. And, they say, okay, you want to scramble around, gain 8 yards, and you punt it on 4th and 2. But, he's going to have to show that growth.
Yeah. No, it's definitely one to kind of think about as the season goes on, because you do see a lot more of those types of quarterbacks coming in. You even see it to a certain extent with Tua, who's coming in for the Dolphins. There was a couple of the kind of higher end quarterbacks that came in this season. So you had Tua. It was one of the main ones that, because obviously playing Alabama and with the Dolphins who had a good season last season, considering everybody before was saying that they were tanking. Out of the rookies that came in maybe even the first 2 rounds of the draft, who do you think will have kind of the biggest impact for their team? It might not even be quarterback. It could be a defensive player, wide receiver, running back. Personally, I like the running back for Kansas City that's going to be playing tonight. I think he suits the Chiefs' way of playing, and it helps with when was it Damien Williams that opted out because of the COVID issues. So I think that's my personal pick. But who do you think would settle best into their first season in the NFL?
Well, prior to the draft, everybody talked about what a great draft it was at receiver. All right, so I'm not saying that this guy's going to be the best rookie player in the league because, let's be honest, the most valuable player awards, they go to the offensive guys 9 times out of 10. And it usually is a skill position player. So I don't think any of those rookies at receiver are going to get enough touches to have a MVP or Rookie of the Year season. I agree with you. Edwards-Helaire, to me, is tailor-made for Andy Reid's offense. Now, think about this one. In all the years Andy Reid has been a head coach, which is 20-some, all the draft rooms he's sat in, all of the drafts he's made, he's not one time, not ever in his career until this year with Edwards-Helaire, ever drafted a running back with the first pick. And that tells me an awful lot about how much he likes this kid. And if the head coach likes you, you're going to get some touches. And if you get enough touches, and I think he's got the ability, he's going to be dynamic. Because what are you going to do with him? Seriously, what are you going to do with him? You be the defensive coordinator for a minute. Now, over on that, you got Tyreek Hill, and you got Travis Kelce, you got Sammy Watkins, you got Nicole Hardeman, and you got that guy in the backfield. Now, you want to die fast or you want to die slow? It's your choice, but you're going to die.
Yeah, it's one of those that you look at. The best teams are those that have not only have balance, but you don't know what they're going to do. It comes back to even when we were talking about Hopkins, is if he's the only offensive threat that you have, whether it's at the receiver position, tight end, running back, you know where you need to focus most of your attention. But when you're saying that we have Travis Kelce, who's was probably one of the top 10 best players last season. Then you have, like you're saying, Sammy Watkins, Tyreek Hill, who can, especially with Tyreek Hill, if you make one mistake, it's a touchdown. And with this kid, like you said, you don't see Andy Reid going out and drafting running backs early in NFL drafts. So the fact that he's done that this season shows how much that he rated him, because it was before Williams even opted out from the season, because that wasn't even in place at that stage. So to even have him where he was prepared to bring him in, maybe he would have played behind Williams at the start of the season. But it's one of those things that you have to look at more of not what coach says, but what they do. And this is one that I think you look at it and it's going to bring their game to even another level, because if you're able to stop Mahomes, which is one of the hardest things to do right now, try stop a dynamic running back as well.
And I tell you what, Kansas City has changed the dynamic for the entire league. Because historically, when I grew up in football, you learned run the ball, use the clock, play great defense, be solid in the kicking game. Now with Kansas City, and this is not to take anything away from their defense or their special teams, because they're outstanding in those areas too, but they're going to hang 30 points against you every week. And so now you better be able to score points. And so, for example, I think the Bills are a very, very good football team. And I think the Bills have started to enter the Super Bowl window. But for them, they've got to get more dynamic on offense, because last year they averaged just over 20 points a game, which was the first time in the Sean McDermott era that they scored 20 points a game. Well, 20 points a game will get you within, earshot of Kansas City, but you ain't going to beat them. And so you're going to have to score 30. And that means you better be dynamic on offense. And what did they do? They went out and got Stephon Diggs. What did, the Broncos do? They went out and got a rookie receiver. What did the Cowboys do? They brought in CeeDee Lamb. Well, they say you don't need receivers. Yeah, you do. You need playmakers. And that's just the way the game has changed.
Yeah, so it kind of brings us into tonight's game very well, that it's two of the kind of teams that everybody likes to go on now because of the quarterbacks, obviously. How do you see tonight's game going? Do you think it's going to be a tight game because it's the first one in, and maybe not everybody's at the level that they would want to be at for the start of the season? Or do you think that it could be a offensive shootout tonight when you have the likes of Mahomes and Watson?
I think there are going to be some points scored in this one, and I think there's going to be a lot of reasons for it. I think that obviously these are dynamic offensive teams with great skill position players, and Johnson, if he can get him 130 yards of scrimmage yards, doesn't have to be running yards. It could be pass. He's a great pass receiver out of the backfield. Yeah. I think that'll be big for the Houston Texans. But on the other hand, I look at Kansas City and I say, okay, last year the Texans went into Kansas City and they beat them, and they did it running the football. Well, yeah, that has been what everybody has said for years. You want to beat Kansas City, run the ball, keep Mahomes on the sideline, and that's the ticket. that was a different Kansas City defense, right? At about midway through the season, Spagnuolo realized what he had, and when he moved the Honey Badger closer to the line of scrimmage and gave him a chance to make plays, which is what that kid does.
Yeah.
They dropped Sorensen in, and Sorensen would be the box safety. Well, that's not, and Daniel Sorensen's a good football player, but Tyrann Mathieu is a difference maker, and they put him in the box, and all of a sudden there's a fumble caused, there's an interception, there's a big hit and the game, the dynamic of their defense changed. So I don't think, the last 6 games of the year, the Chiefs were the best defense in football. And now, will they be the best defense in football initially? I don't know, but I know this: they're very talented on defense. They're almost all back, and I think they're all hungry to show that it's not just the Patrick Mahomes show.
Yeah, I think you're starting to see, even with Tyrann Mathieu, even last year, you're starting to see that kind of form that he had when he was with LSU, where every time there's a play, you just have to look to see where he is, because he always seems to be on the ball. He could be an interesting one, because obviously he played for both teams. So he played for the Texans recently too. So he might be a key player on defense today anyway for the Chiefs. So obviously we've spoken a little bit about that game now. When we go to if we talk about the overall predictions for the season, I've been trying to think of it, because we spoke about earlier that there's a lot of teams that there's always 1 or 2 teams that go from worst to first. I recognize it, maybe not last year, the year before, when the Bears were expected to be very, very bad and end up winning, I think it was 12 or 13 games. Who do you think is the prime candidate this year to maybe do that, maybe come from last in their division last year to first this year?
I think there are 2 teams that stick out, one in the AFC, one in the NFC. When you look at the AFC, I would say the Dolphins. And, a lot of people shake your head, but I'm going to tell you something. Look at the people they brought into Miami, and also look at the division. I think as much as it is the team, it's also the division that they play in. Yeah. So I think that New England will be down from what they've been. Buffalo has its warts. Can they score enough points? The Jets, I don't think, are going to be a great football team. So Miami, with all of those additions, and I think a great situation at quarterback where Ryan Fitzpatrick can start the season and let Tua kind of mature into being a player. I think they're in a prime position to go make that jump. On the other side, in the NFC, the team that I say, and people giggle when I say it, but last year I said the Bills were going to playoffs and everybody giggled. So be careful, is the Detroit Lions, because you got Matthew Stafford back, and Matthew Stafford sometimes can win a game by himself. Now, he obviously needs his teammates, but he can elevate the team to the point where they win a football game. You go out and get Adrian Peterson. They ran the ball decently at the end of the year last year, and they had no quarterbacks. I mean, they were terrible. You got 2 good receivers outside. The offensive line has been rebuilt. If they can get, I think Coach Vermeil said this to us all the time in Kansas City and when he was in LA and even back to Philadelphia. He said it's the 3rd year of your program before you really see what you've got. Because the first year, you're just kind of finding out what you have. And then the second year, you start to move towards where you want to be, and you get rid of some guys. And then the 3rd year, you actually become a program. So I'm anxious to see what the Lions are going to be.
Yeah, it's an interesting one this year, because obviously they've added in the extra teams for the playoffs this year. So is there any of those divisions that you see that there's the possibility? We always talk about there's a possibility of 2 teams from one division making the playoffs. Do you think there's any division this year that you might see 3 teams coming in?
You look at the AFC South, and you got Indianapolis, Tennessee, and the Texans.
Yeah.
You look at the NFC West, and you got the Rams, you got the Chargers, I mean not the Chargers, you got the Rams, you got the Seahawks, and you say, golly, San Francisco's in that division too, and the Cardinals. I mean, the Cardinals are going to be much better, should be. So I think there is a possibility that there could be 3 teams from one division. The problem with those teams is they cannibalize each other during the regular season. So they don't, I could see that division having a 10-6 team, a 9-7 team, and an 8-8 team. And I don't know if 8-8 is going to get you in the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't know either. I've been talking about this with a couple of different people, and I think for me I might be a little bit biased when I talk about the NFC North, but I don't see a lot of difference between the teams, because last year obviously the Packers had a great record, but they never really like went away from teams when they played. Like when they played against the 49ers twice, you saw the difference between a 49ers team who were bound to make the Super Bowl versus the Packers, who, when they played them, they didn't look like that perennial playoff team that which we've seen them being over the last couple of years. We see the previous year where the Bears go in. We've seen the Vikings make the playoffs. I think it was 3 of the last 4 years as well, and come very close to making the Super Bowl. You mentioned that the Lions are one of those options to kind of move in. How close do you think the NFC North might be this season?
Again, that's another one of those divisions, and you look around and you go, how about the AFC North? I mean, the NFC North, AFC North, they're going to beat each other up. I mean, it's going to be like the last man standing, really. I think is what's going to happen in those divisions because they're so close. And the thing I love personally, and again, this kind of dates me, I guess, but the thing I love about the NFC North is you talk about the traditions of the NFL, right? Yeah. The traditions of the NFL, the Purple People Eaters in Minnesota, the Green Bay Packers under Vince Lombardi, and the Lions have had their days, right? I mean, there've been some great players come through the Lions, Barry Sanders and Billy Sims, and then you look at the monsters of the Midway, the Chicago Bears. It's so historic. It's so traditional. It's so much a part of the fiber of the NFL. That's why I love that division so much.
Yeah. So going into some of the overall season predictions, we've spoken about some of the main teams in the NFC and AFC. So who do you think in terms of defensively might be that team that kind of creeps up to be number one? We saw the Chiefs towards the end of the last season. Is there a team that you look, even on paper now, that you see that that's a team you wouldn't want to be an offensive coordinator going up against?
Well, I think there's a number of them, but I tell you, one of the things that football is such a beautiful game. I mean, It is a absolutely beautiful game, and I'm very passionate, obviously, about it. But if you're going to be the best defense in the National Football League, typically your offense will be complementary to you, which means that if you're in Kansas City, you're going to score a ton of points. Well, they're going to give up some points too and some passing yards and all that because teams are desperate to score and trying to play from behind. Now, if you're the Bills, for example, where the Bills know that the formula for success for them is to score 21 points and win 21-19. It's a little bit old school with Sean McDermott.
Yeah.
But the offense is going to protect the defense. In Kansas City, they're going to let it rip. In Tampa, they're going to let it rip. And if they throw an interception, they throw an interception. If they turn it over, they turn it over. Where I think the teams that statistically will be the best defenses are the teams that are going to have an offense that plays to them or with them in complementary football. Who's the most talented defense in the league?
Yeah.
That is really an interesting question because there are some really great groups. I think the Rams have a great group. I think the Chargers have a great group. Now, they when Derwin James went down, that hurt them.
Yeah.
I think, obviously, the Bills have a great group. The Bears have a great group. The Vikings are going to be real young. That's going to be a friend of mine is the defensive coordinator. That's going to be really interesting to see how that goes. But, it's the teams will step up. I think that you're going to see a tremendous amount of good defense played around the league. And defense has changed. What's good defense today? When in the ages of, Tom Landry and Buddy Ryan, it wasn't good defense back then, but the game's changed, so we got to understand that we got our expectations have to keep pace with the game.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. You see the differences now. Like even though we mentioned kind of 4-3 and 3-4, it's a lot of it is nickel defense. So it depends on that side of it too. I think I tend to ask that type of question a lot because being a Bears fan, so used to seeing talented defensive players like you have with Khalil Mack, you've Trevathan, you've Kyle Fuller who had an excellent season last year, Eddie Jackson who had a bit of a down year, but being able to see all these pieces come together, and it's even you see some of the defensive players that have come into the league this year in Washington. You have Chase Young, and be interesting to see how he gets on as well. Do you think that, especially when it comes to kind of the rookie defensive players, because a lot of the time they say it's difficult, especially for kind of the cornerbacks to get in because there's so much information that they have to kind of be able to soak up early on to be able to start. So I think it was Jeff Okudah, I don't think they've said that he's starting against the Bears. How difficult do you think it will be for a lot of the kind of rookie defensive players this season to kind of make that impact, because they haven't had the kind of traditional off season that they normally would, where they would have kind of their mini camp, they have their vet workouts, and then training camp, which they normally have for weeks. But like we said earlier, that it was really kind of confined to maybe 3 or 4 weeks and having no preseason games. How do you think that's going to affect some of the rookie defenders in 2020?
Well, I think Okudah has a unique advantage in that he played at Ohio State, which plays more of an NFL style defense. Most college defenses are very simple, and the nature of college football, if you're a corner, you're going to play quarters, you're going to play 3 deep, and you're going to play a little off man. You're not going to play press. You're not going to play a lot of the read stuff that they play in the NFL. They'll put, again, just to kind of give you an idea, it's not unusual to have a defensive coordinator or secondary coach go on the board and put in 20 coverages in one day in training camp. And they better know every one of them when they go out on the field, and all the adjustments and all the checks that go with it, and how they handle all the formations and splits and all the other things that go into it. So it's a very, very precise and much more involved game in the NFL. It's not that they can't handle it from a physical standpoint. It's just that it's so much more learning, and it's so many more techniques, and it's so much more involved. And there's an old saying in the game that a confused player can't play fast. And that's what usually gets rookies, is everything is so much more detailed.
Yeah, it's kind of when you probably hear it more with quarterbacks more when they say the game slows down for them. It's the one thing that I have to deal with a lot as being a Bears fan, listening to kind of the, as they said, quarterback battle between Trubisky and Foles this year, that a lot of Trubisky's teammates were saying that he seems like the different player. For me, it's hard to believe because you've seen all this tape for the past couple of seasons. Because they've gone just because so many people that watch these that are Bears fans, so I think they'd kill me if I didn't ask. What do you think of kind of that situation that they were put in, where it's Foles against Trubisky, when there was other options that were out there, but also with the kind of unknown of what was going to happen in the offseason? Like, even when free agency was going on, we weren't sure how many kind of preseason games you're going to get. How do you think that worked out? And do you think they made kind of the right decision for now because they didn't get the preseason games? They only had a certain amount of live practices, that it would be hard to bench your starter from the previous season when they're on their last year of their contract? Or do you think that bringing in Foles for where they traded the 4th round pick, they paid the $21 million for him, do you think that they were right in letting Trubisky start the season as a starter, or do you think that they should have let Foles come straight in and start? It's a hard question.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. What you are talking about is one of the dynamics that is so tough in the National Football League, because you got the front office people that say, and the owner and the bean counters in the accounting department go, how much money did we pay this backup quarterback? Right? Yeah. So you're getting pressure that way. And then you've got the personnel office that passed on some more successful quarterbacks than Trubisky that are their jobs are on the line. because the owner comes to them and goes, how come we drafted this guy and now we're spending this much money on a guy to beat him out, right? Yeah. So all of those dynamics play into this whole thing. And the tough thing for Matt Nagy is he's got to work through all that. And he's got to remember he's got 60 guys in the locker room that are trying to win and take care of their families. And the biggest decision that you make every year is who's your starting quarterback. So, that's not an enviable position to be in. I think what you're going to see in Chicago is, and I agree with what you said about the fact that no preseason games, it's more difficult to win a job, to legitimately win a job. So initially, Trubisky's the safer bet, right? Yeah. And then if, you put him on a short leash, and if after a couple of weeks or 3 weeks he's not getting it done, then you can go to Foles before the season unravels on you. But yeah. I think what you're going to see out of Trubisky, and I'm not saying this because you're a Bears fan, I think you're going to see a better Mitch Trubisky. I don't know how much better, but he doesn't have to be. He doesn't have to be great. He just has to not screw it up and let the defense take care of him. Now, they got Robert Quinn. I love Akeem Hicks. They got Trevathan. They've got players at every level on that defense. And I think, again, sometimes for coaches it takes a while, because I truly believe that Chuck Pagano didn't realize what an unbelievable weapon he had in Khalil Mack last year. And now you bring in Quinn, and there's another rusher on the other side, and now you can start to do some of the fun stuff with a guy who's as dynamic as Khalil Mack is, and I think he'll have a bounce-back year this year.
Yeah, I think the one thing that is important as well, because obviously from Matt Nagy coming from Andy Reid's coaching tree, is that the importance of the tight end in his offense as well. And last year it was basically non-existent. You see the 4 tight ends that were on that ended the season last year, I think only one of them is currently on the roster this year. So it is one of those interesting things. So again, we're probably just going to have to see. And really, for me, I've always said that Trubisky just needs to kind of be that kind of Alex Smith type player, just manage the game and try and score. When you get into the red zone, try and score, and try not to, like, it sounds stupid. It was the same thing that when Cutler was there. It's just don't give away the stupid interception that is going to put more pressure on your defense, because even if you can give your defense decent field position where they can be the ones that can really dictate what happens when they're on the field, that's when you see them being successful. The same thing happened 2 years ago, where it seemed like the Bears would score on their opening possession. They may not score for a couple more, but the defense having that lead were able to attack offenses, when it seemed last year they were constantly playing from behind, and that was kind of one of the main issues. So that kind of brings me to the last little bit, is the kind of games that are going on Sunday. So we've already mentioned kind of to a large extent the game tonight, but some of the important games that I kind of noted down that I looked at, and it's nice that the division games are the first week. I always like it when it's the first week and last week of the season, because you get to open up with kind of a rival game, and also you get to finish the season. So one of them that I just kind of noted, the Packers-Vikings, was one that I thought was going to be a good game. How do you see that one going?
Well, I think, as I said, Andre Patterson, the new defensive coordinator in Minnesota, is a friend of mine, and I had him on my little Coffee with Coach that we do every Wednesday on Twitter, and he said, we're going to be young. We're going to be young, but we were young before, and now I know they just lost Daniel Hunter, which that's got to be a concern. But I think offensively, with Kubiak there, that what they'll do offensively is control the football. They'll run the ball with the zone, and you'll see they're very similar to what San Francisco does. The thing that scares me about Minnesota is their ability to push the ball down the field. Who do they have at wideout that can run by anybody? They're not built that way. So, I love their tight end. I love, the running back. I think they got the offensive line is built to run the football. They're going to have to protect their young defense for a while, and then they're going to have to win close games. But that's what Zimmer wants to do. That's that's his formula for success. On the other side, man, I'm going to tell you something. How many times have you ever seen a guy do more with less than what Aaron Rodgers did last year? I mean, he's got Jones at running back, and he's got Adams at wide receiver, and then it's a cast of nobodies and a patchwork offensive line. And he took them to one game from a Super Bowl. Now, they got blown out in San Francisco. I get you. But you have to get there first, right? And what he was able to accomplish was amazing. Now, it baffles me how you could, and I understand you got a plan for the future, but to draft Jordan Love and not give that quarterback some more weapons with all those receivers that were in the draft that could have come in and really helped the Packer team, I don't know. I don't know. And I think the Packer defense has got to show people that they can stop the run, because I think Minnesota's going to come out and they are going to give them run until they like it. And if they don't like it, they're going to get it some more.
Yeah, I completely agree with you when it comes to the Packers, because obviously being a fan in the division, it's one of those when the draft comes around, not only are you looking at your team, but your rivals. And with everything that was going on, with everybody saying it was one of the deepest wide receiver classes in years, probably since the year that Brandon Cooks and all them came out. I was really surprised that you see that the likes of Chicago and you see Minnesota drafting receivers and tight ends, but you don't see the Packers drafting someone that you feel like can come in and contribute in the first year. It's one of those that you have to wonder, if things go south, how happy is Rodgers going to be moving forward, because he knows his time. He knows his time. Not that he's going to get any worse, but it's the fact that management are clearly getting ready for when he's done, and they're not supporting him either.
I think you're right, and I think he realizes that, and I think that was a shot across the bow, frankly. And but when you look at it, he's a prideful player. He's a guy that still recognizes that he's at the top of his game, and he knows what he can do, but he can't do it all by himself. And so it's not only the draft. I mean, there were some great receivers that were available. Emmanuel Sanders would have gone in and been a great compliment to Devontae Adams in Green Bay. And to let guys like that not come to your football team, he has a right to be upset. And then Kumaro, which is one of his favorites, and he wanted to keep him, and they cut him. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I was talking to a friend of mine who coaches in the NBA, National Basketball Association, and I said to him, "What's the key to coaching in the NBA?" He said, "You got to be able to get along with your three best players," right? Well, I thought about that in relation to football, and it's really kind of true in football too. Your difference maker players, your guys that are difference makers, they better be on your side, because they're going to steer the locker room and they're going to steer public opinion. And so I think that young head coach up in Green Bay needs to take a lesson from that. But again, you got a young head coach, and you got Gutekunst is his first GM job. So there's a lot of youth in that organization in Green Bay that had never been there. Teddy Thompson was there for 1,000,000 years, and there was kind of a Green Bay way, and it's kind of changed a little bit.
Yeah, you see it even before. So when Ted Thompson was there, you never saw many free agent acquisitions coming in. You would always see them re-signing their own drafted players. But then you look in the past few seasons at how many of those drafted players are making an impact on the team. You don't see as many as you did before. And it's, as you said, it's gone away from the Packers way. The interesting point you make about the NBA is you hear now with kind of the new kind of GMs and stuff coming in that it's a players' league. And you don't hear that as much in the NFL, even though it remains to be true. Like, you look at the Chiefs and you look at the Texans, you look at even back when Manning was in Indy, that it was down to those players. When Brady was in New England, it was a lot of it went with Brady. If Brady didn't get on with Belichick, you started seeing some issues in camp. You saw that last year with some of the stories coming out. But it seems that in Green Bay, they're walking on a tightrope that your best player for the past decade plus, he's Hall of Fame quarterback, and you only have one Super Bowl with him when you should have more. And like I said, this isn't going to make him any happier this season, especially if it doesn't go the way that they want it to go.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. 100%.
Yeah. I guess the other game that kind of sticks out, I think it's an obvious one, is the Bucs and the Saints. So Saints over the last few years have been, I think they've been one of the more unlucky teams that for a good 2 to 3 seasons should have been in the Super Bowl, in my opinion. A couple plays here and there. Obviously there were stories this week with Alvin Kamara last week, wanting to get traded because, again, he sees, I think we saw it with Leonard Fournette leaving, that he wasn't getting the money that he wanted. And you see it to a certain extent with Dalvin Cook as well. But then you also see with the Bucs, with all their new additions, do you think that the Bucs are going to be able to gel well together from the get-go? Or do you think that one of the stronger teams that we've seen in previous years in the Saints will have enough to get it done this weekend?
Well, every year there's a team that everybody loves. The hype machine is running 100 miles an hour. And I thought last year it was the Cleveland Browns. This year it's the Tampa Bay Bucs. People have to understand this is a way more complex animal than just collecting football cards. You know, like a Tom Brady card, that's a beautiful card. Gronkowski, that's a beautiful card. And Ndamukong Suh, that's a beautiful card. They got some football cards, but so do the Saints. It's what team is going to play the best complementary football, what team is going to get hot, what team's going to stay healthy. There's so much that plays into it. Now, obviously, and I'm a huge Bruce Arians fan, I think they've got a guy that can manage all those big personalities. He can manage all the high expectations. He can manage the hype. On the other side, Sean Payton has to realize that, you know, they're starting the Super Bowl window is starting to close in New Orleans. And there has to be a tremendous sense of urgency. Tom Morstead, their kicker, is an ex-player of mine. And I asked both he and Emmanuel Sanders, who played for me, about that very same thing. Do you feel a sense of urgency that you hadn't felt in New Orleans previously? And they both, said, Emmanuel said, well, I don't know because I haven't been here. And Tom said, no, it's always about the urgency here. But the bottom line is they've gotten right to the cusp. And, you know, they have the miracle in Minneapolis. And then last year they get beat by the 49ers at home. And you just say, this is a football team that should be, as you said, have at least one more Super Bowl ring than it's got. And I think this is a critical year for them. They have one of the best offensive lines in football. They've got Cameron Jordan on defense that can rush the passer. They've got great depth at linebacker. They're good in the secondary. Morstead gives you a great kicking game. This team is primed to become, the NFC representative in the Super Bowl. But they have to do it. And Tampa Bay, I think, will be a team we talk about in November if they can stay healthy. Yeah. But I'm going to tell you, as a football coach, watching Brady at the end of the year last year, I saw a Tom Brady that I had never seen before. A guy who felt the rush more than the rush was really there. A guy who couldn't complete balls outside the numbers on the field. Who's, if you threw a net 25 yards down the field and from numbers to numbers, you'd catch every ball he threw in a game or every ball he completed in a game. He didn't have the ability to stretch the field as much. Now, part of that was he didn't have many weapons around him either. But he's going to have to prove that he can do those things, because if he doesn't, people are going to gang up on him.
Yeah, it's the one thing we saw with Brady last year is he looked human compared to previous years. Yeah. So the last thing I'll ask is, I know it's early, but what would be your prediction for the final game of the season, Super Bowl? Who do you think makes it for the AFC and NFC?
Well, I think the Chiefs will go back. And again, this is all if they can stay healthy. I think they got the best roster and the best quarterback. And then in the other side, I think the Saints should win that thing. Now, the Tampa getting better makes it tougher for the Saints, because the Saints, that was kind of not a cakewalk division, but it was an easier division than it is now. Atlanta's going to score points. Carolina, we don't know about. but Tampa Bay certainly will be much, much better. So the Saints have got their work cut out, but I think they'll emerge out of the NFC.
That's perfect. Thanks for all your time today. Just everybody remember, like, subscribe, and we'll get more content on the NFL as we go throughout each week. So thank you for your time, Jeff.
That's my pleasure. And listen, man, anytime you need it, let's talk some ball. I love it.